From the former convent of the Good Shepherd overlooking Inwood Hill Park in New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where you meet musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome rock doc, concert film director, music producer, engineer, mixer, and DJ, Jesse Lauter. Jesse's production credits include artists such as Tedeschi Trucks Band, Stills Judy Collins, and Ben Harper, among many others. Jesse directed, produced, and co-edited Learning to Live Together, The Return of Mad Dogs and Englishmen, about Joe Cocker's Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, featuring the late Leon Russell, Tedeschi Trucks Band, Rita, Coolidge, and Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes, amongst many others. The movie premiered at the Woodstock FIlm Festival, made its international premiere at the Raindance Film Festival, and won Best Music Film at the Prague and Amsterdam International Film Festivals. Jesse was the executive producer of Bob Dylan in the 80s, Volume 1, a tribute album to Bob Dylan's overlooking 1980s catalog, and of Sincerely L. Cohen, a live celebration of Leonard Cohen, a tribute concert that took place in Brooklyn after the passing of Leonard Cohen. In addition, he is currently the producer of the Relic Sessions on Twitch, a weekly live stream concert series with the largest viewership of a music channel on the Twitch platform. You can also catch him spinning his favorite rock brands of funk, disco, soul, reggae, and classic rock at festivals like Bonnaroo and Outside Lands. We're going to talk to him about, well, most of it, and many musical passions he has. But first, let me welcome you, Jesse, to Inwood Artworks On Air. Great to see you.
It's so good to see you too, Aaron. Wow, hearing your resume getting read off is always like, what? Oh, God, yeah, I did that. Yeah.
Remember that? When did I have time for that?
I know, right?
And you did it all here in Inwood for most of it, right?
You know, I've lived in Inwood since 2007. And that was my junior year of college. So yeah, my entire post-grad professional career has been based here, and the best kept secret in New York City.
Well, let's hope the podcast only goes to Dyckman Street and back. Well, it's safe to say you have an unbridled passion for music, yes. Which is something we both share. Is there an early moment in your time of life, I'm guessing it's pre-grad school, that you can reflect on that drew you to the power of music?
I was very lucky to grow up in a house of music appreciators, not the traditional musical household. My parents are not musicians. I had some uncles who were musicians, but music was always in the house. My father, the older I get, I recognize how great his taste is. And it was...
Can't teach taste.
Can't teach it, no. And, he got it from, he was a Northern Californian in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and grew up going to Monterey Jazz, and my grandmother would take him to that. So a lot of jazz, a lot of blues, classic jazz.
Also a great documentary, by the way, the Monterey Pop Jazz Festival.
Oh, the Monterey Pop Festival. Sure,
yeah.
Sure. D.A. Pennebaker. Yeah. And funny, actually, I did something with Monterey Pop, but we don't need to get into that. Okay. So yeah, father had the sort of jazz blues realm covered, as well as some of the singer-songwriters, the Bob Dylans and the Leonard Cohens. That was, my father would introduce me to those artists. And my mother sort of had the 70s rock, Goldie Oldies thing. So sort of this, Crosby, Stills and Nash, FM radio. Her favorite band was the Doobie Brothers. And and her name's Debbie, and her nickname's Doobie. So so I was lucky to have parents with good taste. And I know them. It's kind of funny. I think it could easily peg me, or there's a stigma around it. But I'm a huge Fish person, Fish fan. The band Fish from Vermont. Mm-hmm. Been around for a very long time. But I saw my first Fish concert when I was 8 years old. And now this is a band that, yes, there's a stigma to Fish. I think they're a marvelous band, and they're still doing it, and I still go see them actively. But to see a band like that at a very early age, and the band sort of prides itself on the fact that they cover a lot of genres. They're genre benders, and they play rock and roll, funk music.
They're not just a jam band.
They're not just a jam band. They're, if you just equate, they jam, they improvise, but their influences are really artists like Frank Zappa, the Velvet Underground, Parliament Funkadelic.
Musicians.
Actual musicians who practiced and rehearsed. And so I learned about them at a very, very early age. I saw a show very, very early on, and that always has stuck with me as sort of this moment where I was like, okay, yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I was 8 years old, and I stuck to it. So,
Do you have a favorite Fish song?
No, definitely not. Yeah. Too many.
That's a true Fish fan's reply. Well, when did you decide to make it your career? Like, having a passion for it's one thing, just to make it your vocation is quite something else.
Yeah, I think my initial idea was that I would be in rock bands. Like, I would actually be playing. I'm a guitar player. So I was, I had bands in middle school. I had bands in high school. I had bands in college, and I stuck with bands a little bit after college. But I discovered the possibility of, the recording studio as a tool and an instrument at the age of 14 years old. And I started interning in recording studios at that age. And I loved recording. I would make home demos, pre-Pro Tools. I would do it on cassettes. I would do it on RAM discs,
like QI20s, the little tiny
ones.
Oh,
yeah. There was the roll-in recorders too. Yeah, obviously mini disc. And I just loved recording. And then the opportunity came up that there was a school being developed at NYU called the Clive Davis Institute. It was a really new department, and it was actually my mother who found out about it. And she said, you should look into this and see if you can get in. They're not accepting a lot of people. And lucky enough, I got into this department, 20 other kids, and it profoundly changed my life. I studied with incredible producers, rock writers, music industry professionals, and I was really I was under the tutelage of some pretty amazing people. Everyone from Tony Visconti, who produced David Bowie, to Bob Power, who worked with Tribe Called Quest, The Roots, Nick Sansano, who worked with Sonic Youth and Public Enemy, and Jim Anderson, who is a 12-time Grammy Award-winning jazz engineer. So we had these facilities that were incredible, great recording studios, large format recording consoles. So I learned on big desks. I learned how to record to tape. And that was, I came to New York City at the age of 18 doing that. And then my junior year of college, I moved to Inwood,
wow.
Which was a pretty bold move for someone who is still in the throes of his, college years.
A lot of late train rides home, I'm sure, from the village.
Oh, yeah, and also late for class, too. I remember one of my teachers was like, dude. But you know what's funny about that, though? It was my Nick, the guy who I mentioned who worked with Sonic Youth. He called me out on being late, coming in from uptown. And obviously we know what trains are like, leaving. Sometimes you never know if it's going to be the 35 minutes it takes to West 4th or if it's going to, or the 50. Yeah. And then he moved uptown, and he apologized to me. I was like, I told you so,
But it's a great trade-off, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's a nice buffer, right? It keeps a buffer. Yeah. Let's talk about your film, Learning to Live Together,
Sure.
The Return of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Mm-hmm. Were you a big Joe Cocker fan before making this project? This is a really, for those of you who don't know, I'll let you talk about it, but 36 musicians playing together, right?
Yes, yeah. So Joe Cocker and Leon Russell, I'm a huge fan. I learned about Mad Dogs and Englishmen, the tour of 1970, where Joe needed a band in a pinch. His band that he was touring with up to that point, the Grease Band, the band that you see in the Woodstock footage that he is probably most famous for, With a Little Help from My Friends performance that, still stands the test of time, that people...
John Belushi even covered it.
Yes, of course, the famous Belushi impersonation. Yes. That band that played with Joe in that performance, they quit, or Joe maybe fired them.
Woodstock, forget it, we're done.
Exactly. We've seen it all. So Joe needed a band, and he hits up Leon Russell, who at the time wasn't a household name. He was actually a producer in Los Angeles and a session player, but he knew all the players in LA, and Joe and Leon had done some work together. Joe hits up Leon, says, I need a band. And Leon says, well, I've had this concept of just, bringing like 50 people out on the road. Would you want to do that? And Joe says, sure, because I need a band. And Leon also was like, it's also easier for me to just like get a bunch of people rather than like pick the 4 or pick the 5. So Joe goes all in on this crazy concept. The record label's like, holy crap, we have to film this. We have to charter a plane. We have to record this. And thus Mad Dogs and Englishmen. And if you're a fan of this music, it exists on a lot of people's top shelf. It's one of my favorites. And there's a documentary about that tour. It's a verite documentary. You watch it, and it's a lot of slice of life. It's, you're seeing what it's like to be on the road. It's not a sit-down interview film. You really kind of don't know what's going on throughout the whole thing. I call it the Robert Altman rock doc because it's like, what the heck is going on? There's like soundtrack over soundtrack, and like someone's talking, and who's
it's more
that?
Of a voyeur thing where you're just kind of
Yes.
peeking into different slices of life.
Absolutely. Interspersed with these incredible performances
Right.
by Joe and the band. So this tour happens over 2 months in 1970, and it never happens in any way, shape, or form ever again. And so if you're a fan of this music, this was sort of like a golden goose, was like, will the Mad Dogs and Englishmen ever reunite? So in 2014, Joe Cocker passes away, and the Tedeschi Trucks Band, Grammy Award-winning band with Derek Trucks, considered by many to be the greatest living guitar player, and his wife Susan, who is one of the greatest soul singers out there. They have this band with 12 people in it that they formed sort of in, influenced by Mad Dogs and Englishmen. So they were actually talking to Joe Cocker about doing Mad Dogs and Englishmen with him at one point, pretty vaguely, but it was in the works. So with this opportunity gone, they pivoted and asked Leon if he'd be interested in doing a Joe tribute with Mad Dogs, and then they were like, you know what, let's just try to invite every living Mad Dog we can. And that's what my film is about. It's about the original tour and about this reunion, and they managed to pull off the only reunion of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen.
And how did you get invited into the process? Because it wasn't you knocking on Leon's door,
I
right?
wasn't knocking on Leon's door, no. But the concert took place at a festival in Virginia called Lock-In, and the principal of that festival is a guy named Pete Shapiro, who in New York runs a lot of venues, actually not too far from Inwood, the Capitol Theater.
Sure.
And
Great venue,
and the Brooklyn Bowl. And Pete and I have been, collaborators, and he's been someone who I've worked with over the years on many different things, including now the Relic Studio, and one of my favorite humans in the crazy music industry at least in my section of the music industry, and is just such a beloved person. And he was the guy who opened the door for me. And it's like, hey, this guy wants to make, at this point, I'm a record producer. I'm not a filmmaker, right? This is about 6 years ago.
It's your first documentary, right?
Yeah. First, yes, technically. I'd like to call it my first. In the middle of it, I actually made another film for Tedeschi Trucks,
right?
Because they saw what I was doing and they needed to make a film of their own. For the
hey,
record.
let's ask that guy.
Yeah, let's ask the guy who's like doing this other thing for us, right? And he's like, he seems to know what he's doing. Little did they know. I like to joke with Derek and Susan about that now. It's like, you didn't know that I wasn't really a director yet, did you? I was faking it till I made it.
The reason why I brought that up, though, because you never get something on your own.
Right.
It's something that you always have someone vouching for you, or it's about relationships, or opening that door for you for this brand new experience to you, which opened up so many more doors.
Yes, absolutely. Never be afraid to, ask people for help, or at least put yourself out there. Yeah. Shoot your shot. It's like, because if you don't do it, then you're
let them say no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and don't get too upset when they say no, because trust me, people are going to tell you no most of the time.
Well, we hope you can submit it for the next Inwood Film Festival as it comes around.
Will you please?
Well, it's up to you. You got to submit it. And so everybody knows, too, it's never just up to me. I have a selection committee. People don't get mad in the street and, take me out with a knife in Seatown for not selecting their film, whatever. It's not just up to me, but I open the door, you have to walk through it.
We'll talk about it offline.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, our year of film festivals is up though in October, but
right.
I am very excited to see the program that you've put together for this year's
festival.
It's
going to be fantastic this year. We're just happy to be able to do it.
Awesome.
But we don't have windows or programs. We try to work with people, but
cool.
We'll talk. But as they say in New York City, we'll talk. So I want to mention that you've also executive produced, back to the album front of things, tributes to Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And so we see with Mad Dogs and then Bob and Leonard. There's a big tribute theme to your producing work, so to speak. So you're a bit of. Do you see yourself? I mean, not intentionally, maybe, but a bit of a musical archivist.
It is very intentional. I like if I'm a sound historian. I'm a crate digger, at record stores. I love teaching people.
That's how I spent
music.
most of my time. Going through a record store is like the most calming therapy I think could possibly be. Just going through all the albums.
Well, maybe we should talk about opening a record store here at Inwood.
Wouldn't that be nice? I have at least 5 minutes of my day for that. I can possibly do that.
We sort of had one at what was the antique store on your block?
Scavengers.
Yeah, they had a record bin there. Yeah.
Well, let's talk. Maybe it could possibly happen. We can do Inwood Artworks records and things.
Totally. I mean, look, I love music history. My taste is very aligned with older music. When I DJ, I'm usually playing like funk and disco and soul music from the 60s and 70s. And I work with a lot of new bands too. But I just, have this inclination for older music. And so I work on these tribute projects that my mission is to bring light to things that maybe people from my generation missed or younger generations might not have an opportunity to learn about unless someone like me did something to pay tribute and honor it.
Well, I think it's wonderful because it's like tastemakers are made by showing other people taste. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like no, listen to this. It's like I didn't have a big brother or big sister. Okay. I had to go out and find it myself, or from my other friends who had big brothers or big sisters. Or I still have the fondest memories of riding the school bus like in 4th grade. And you remember boomboxes, people? Sure. Ghetto blasters, if you will.
Yes.
Depending on your neighborhood. You had people with the cassettes playing, like the very first Mellencamp album.
Right.
In 1982, whatever. And you're just like, who the heck is this guy? Some guy out of Indiana or whatever. And look he's blown up to be the biggest thing ever.
Right.
At least for the Midwest. He's like, it's like same thing. It's like you drive over the state lines in New Jersey, all of a sudden everyone's, dial goes to Bruce Springsteen.
Sure.
Same thing with Mellencamp in Indiana. As soon as you drive over the border, boom, it's a Mellencamp on the station.
Right.
So it's stuff like that. You're just, and other new bands at the time, like the Duran Durans were coming out back in the early 80s. And, other, obviously, Queen and things like that you'd listen to. Like you would never have listened to certain bands like Iron Maiden. Like what? Like who the heck? Because it was very geographical back then.
Sure,
we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of things, and so unless you did have someone say, "Look at this, listen to this," you didn't know. It's obviously the world is much more global than it ever. It wasn't even city to city when we were growing up.
Well, that was the importance of having labels then, because then you would get out of your locale and you would be on a national stage. Less so now, right? You could actually blow up in a market that you literally have nothing to do with except for the fact that someone picked up your video off of a TikTok in New Mexico, and like now you're the biggest thing in Albuquerque and you gotta play with that bass there because of the internet.
It was always like I'm huge in Japan, right?
Big in Japan.
Remember the same kind of thing, and you never knew why.
Right.
It's just because people were starved for certain music or certain sounds. So I think it's great what you're doing and being somewhat of a historian, ensuring the legacy of artists in many ways. So what is it about these artists' music that you want to sustain and make people don't forget? Like other aspects of these different artists that have any kind of commonality, you feel?
Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Leon Russell, Joe Cocker.
Because they're definitely because they're definitely all of a certain era.
Yeah, they are. What is the running thread between all of them? It's interesting. For me, in a lot of ways, I'm Jewish, and with Dylan and Leonard Cohen, there's this sort of, you put them on this sort of pulpit, right? As a kid, like this is cooler than religious school.
Yeah, it's like that's who should be doing the temple.
Right. So you knew your rabbi was cool if they would like slip in Dylan and Leonard Cohen quotes into their sermons.
The hurricane was playing in the middle of a Torah class.
Yeah, I'm such a Dylan fan too that I love the Christian stuff. And which is what my record that I did that sort of begins with the Christian period and it goes to the late 80s. I think the thing I was concerned about with the 80s music was, here with Dylan were these records that are probably the most ignored in his whole canon. and a lot of it had to do with the production from the 80s.
Which, so pre-Wilbury stuff, right?
Well, Wilbury's is 80s, so
yeah,
Wilbury's was fair game on the record.
Okay.
Someone did a Wilbury song on the album. Congratulations, Elvis Perkins is an artist I've worked with and actually have worked with here in Inwood quite a bit. So what we tried to do with that was, pay tribute, but also modernize it. Also, even like kind of take it back. Like there's some tracks on that record that sort of sound like the Basement Tapes, which is 1967 Dylan. For me, it was more of like a fun production exercise, and it was like anything really specific about, okay, this is what Bob Dylan was concerned with as a writer in the 80s. I think Bob was sort of all over the place in the 80s when it comes down to it. I think a lot of artists of that period were. But there were moments of brilliance. Some of his greatest songs were written in the 80s, Every Grain of Sand, most of the time. So if you listen to my album, there's about 25 tracks on it. It's sprawling. So, but man, I made that a long time ago. But
but congratulations getting the rights for all that stuff.
Thank you.
That's tough.
No, that was it's not with a tribute album. It's different than a movie. You don't actually have to get rights for it. You can cover anything and put it on an album. You just have to pay the royalty to Harry Fox. What I had to do was get the blessing of the Dylan camp.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You couldn't move forward without that.
Well, I don't know if am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Sure.
Okay. So
we'll bleep you out.
The name of the record initially was Shitty Dylan. That was a band I had in college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was a riff on the Wayne's World line, the Shitty Beatles.
Oh, right.
Yeah. When they're talking to Meatloaf at the beginning. Yeah, the Shitty Beatles. Like,
right.
Is that just a clever name or do they suck? They suck. So me and my buddies in college, we had a joke band called Shitty Dylan. And so the idea was, well, let's make Shitty Dylan the album with a bunch of like amazing artists. So that's what it was. It was called Shitty Dylan Volume 1. We went to Bob's manager, Jeff Rosen, who's since become a dear friend and confidant in my life. And he said, I'll support this record just as long as you don't call it Shitty Dylan.
You're like, okay, no.
Okay, then Bob Dylan in the 80s, Volume 1. And then back to the Wilburys, the idea would be if we ever decided to do a second volume, we'd call it Volume 3.
Right.
Volume
yeah,
3.
As the second Wilburys album is Volume 3, right?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I love the Wilbury stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's some of the most brilliant stuff. And obviously, that could be its own documentary in itself.
Yeah, you know what? And there is a ton of video footage, as we know. So, that's interesting.
Yeah, because there's only a few rounds still.
Yeah, true.
Well, moving from the past to the present, you also host a weekly live stream concert series called the Relic Sessions on Twitch. So tell our listenership, since it's about listening, it's about music.
Sure.
What about makes the Relic Session so unique?
Well, so I'll tell the whole story, and it goes back to Pete Shapiro, who he owns Relics magazine. So Relics is a magazine. It's one of the only in-print independent music magazines, still in print, based in the United States. So there's Mojo and Uncut, and NME in the UK, but in the US, like Rolling Stone and Spin and all these other magazines, they're all owned by like Condé Nast and crap, right? They're all owned by bigger companies. Relics is completely independent and still manages to be in print, which is pretty incredible for a music magazine. But they also they're a media company as well, and they had done a bunch of video stuff from their office, but the office closed down in the pandemic. And I get a call in December of 20, and the winter of the first winter of the pandemic, from Pete, and he asked me if I'd be interested in producing this new series for them. It's live streaming. It's sound, but it's video as well. And at this point, I've done enough of it to know what I'm doing. And what we did is we took over the Jazz Standard on 27th and Park. And we turned that venue into an exclusive live streaming venue. And we have bands come in. And, in the beginning of the pandemic, it was really something quite powerful because a lot of these artists who hadn't been playing shows for a year, this was like their first time on a stage with like monitors. I remember we had this one artist come in, and there was like one of my sound engineers, there was like a moment of feedback, and I was like, oh, so sorry about that. And she says, no, I haven't heard feedback in a year. And so it's on Twitch, which is the Amazon's like YouTube, and it's all live. we have bands come in and they play about an hour. They interact with the audience on the chat, so it feels like there's an audience there. And it's just great. We have like emerging acts. We have also popular acts too. Next month we have Dispatch, OAR, and Hanson coming to the studio. Yeah, it's gonna be a crazy May. And we've had Christian McBride on the jazz front to keep the jazz standard thing alive. Relics is kind of a Grateful Dead, what was originally a Grateful Dead fanzine, and also tied into Phish as well. A lot of Phish love from that magazine, but they cover all genres as well. So a lot of jam bands.
Never thought Phish and Hanson would be mentioned in the same sentence.
I know. Well, actually, Phish did cover Bop as a joke in 1998, but it's a yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, all the useless Phish knowledge in this mind of mine, But yes,
I think the next thing is having a Phish podcast for yourself.
Oh no, absolutely not. I've been on a few though.
Okay, well, there you go. See, I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah.
And then so this is kind of an extension of your life as a DJ in a way too, because you're kind of a tastemaker doing. Are you help programming it as well?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Fantastic.
As well.
And then are you going out DJing now or
I
not
am.
So much?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm also I'm starting to do it a lot more. I've done, like you mentioned before, I've done an assortment of stuff. I used to regularly play at like a couple clubs downtown. Like I would be have a weekly slot at the now defunct place called the Hi-Fi Bar, which is on Avenue A. But even tonight, even though I don't know when this is airing, but I'm going to the Brooklyn Bowl and I will be DJing at the Brooklyn Bowl tonight. But yeah, and for Phish, I DJ at their Mexico getaway, which is a fun gig for me because I get to play after one of my favorite bands. But yeah, I love DJing. It's a lot of fun, and it's it exercises a couple muscles for me. It exercises the music history and curation, and then on top of it, the musical element. Because I don't just play songs and just fade into another one. I'm trying to think of transitions,
right.
time, key. And I try to make it a show. I try to make it
feel the energy in the room.
Exactly.
See how people are reacting to the natural progression of the sound.
That's all. That's the name of the game.
Love it. Yeah. Love it. Well, maybe we'll get you to do something up here sometime.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Just open your window and put a speaker outside.
Yeah. And then get CB12 just complaining. What the heck was that guy doing?
Oh, they'll complain anyway. It doesn't matter.
I know. Yeah.
I know some people at CB12. We can get something happening.
Okay.
You never know.
Well, but, I don't know if this should be for public consumption, but at one point I did make a really big effort to try to put concerts on the lawn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's stuff CB12. That's the Parks Department.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I know about the Parks Department doing the films outside and doing Shakespeare outside and doing everything else outside.
You guys are doing a fantastic job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and likewise. And let's not give up on the dream. Maybe we can do something out there.
It's a perfect field for it. You look at it, and I've taken some professionals who do this, outdoor concerts, like on the White House and Central Park and stuff. And I've taken them there. I'm just like, you see this, and that like where the Rock is, and whichever.
To Gaelic Field. It's where we did our alfresco movies pre-pandemic.
Exactly. Yeah, a perfect place for a stage.
It's a perfect place for a stage, and it can be done. I think now, there was more. Well, we can talk offline. But I think there's more understanding now than perhaps before. I think some people see how silly they've been. Mm-hmm. And other times, I think there's more people in roles now that are enabling people to make things happen for underserved communities.
Sure.
That perhaps weren't as open to it before.
Sure.
But then again, it's all bureaucracy.
Yes, it is.
It's very subjective. I work in the arts. It's all about people saying no and yes based off a whim half the time, and that's the same as city government. Yep. So we're used. I'm very much.
Which I know nothing about.
Which I know nothing about, but I have to deal with on a daily basis. So I very much understand how to. Like I said before, it's about people and who's going to help you.
Yes,
so but we'll figure it out.
Yes.
On a parting note, we know you have many favorites and many different bands, and we mentioned some emerging talent. Who are you listening to right now? Like turn people on to.
Oh my God! Wow. It's fine. I'm wearing a shirt, for people in video land for Silk Sonic, which is like they won, a ton of Grammys just about a month ago, and I was at the Grammys and I got to see them perform, and it was just fabulous. If they go on tour, definitely spend the exorbitant amount of money that the ticket costs because it's well worth it. There's two artists I'm working with who I simply adore. One named Neil Francis, who's a singer, piano player from Chicago, funky. If you like Leon Russell, Dr. John, Elton John, here's like a kind of like a younger version of that with a modern mentality. And then another artist I work with, she's based in upstate New York, named Michaela Davis. We just did a project together, and she's a harpist and singer, but if you like the Grateful Dead, she plays with Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead. Also, you know what? I don't know if we're wrapping up now. Little known fact for all you Deadheads out there. Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead, early resident of Inwood.
I did know that.
You did know that?
Yeah,
Okay.
but not people do, though, so I'm glad you said it.
Mickey and I talked about it. I told Mickey once, I was like, oh yeah, reminded that, hey dude, I live in Inwood. And he was like, get the hell out, man. Oh, tell me all about it. How is it over there? Is that like,
and guess who else lived here? Paul Stanley.
Paul Stanley? No. What?
I think 215, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, and Seaman, close to it over there.
Wild. There's another drummer who I just adore, I have since I was a kid, named Billy Martin, who grew up in this neighborhood of the band Tedeschi, Martin, and Wood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he grew up here. I think his father was here, his parents were here basically up until recently.
Wouldn't it be great to put together like a Roots and Inwood concert?
Yeah, right? And have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar be the MC.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Get Lin-Manuel to do his thing and get, Martin, we get Stanley, we get Mickey Hart.
That'd be pretty weird.
That'd be really weird.
One artist I work with, Lenny Kay, Patti Smith's guitar player, and Lenny's been up in Inwood to work in my studio quite a bit. I have my recording studios in my apartment. And Lenny has memories of him and Patty, visiting Jim Carroll up here. And so I've gotten those stories, and they would just hang out in the park and stuff.
Wow, we should get this for a documentary.
Yeah, I know, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Motorcycle Diaries, for those who don't know Jim Carroll.
Yeah. Basketball.
Think Basketball Diaries. Motorcycle Diaries, totally different movie.
Yeah.
Che Guevara, I believe, and everything else going on.
Yeah. There's a great, rich history of this neighborhood of, amazing artists. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us here on this kind of a rainy Saturday afternoon here in Inwood.
With the farmer's market just out the front door.
You got to love it, right? Totally. And before we say goodbye, where can we send people to find out more about your current projects?
Oh, wow. I have a website. It's my name, .com, JESSELAUTER.com. But I'm probably of all the social media platforms, I'm most active on Instagram. And that's JESS, Jess Lauter. So no, not Jesse Lauter on Instagram, Jess Lauter, JESSLAUTER. That's the handle. And then if they want to learn about Mad Dogs, the documentary, it's maddogsdoc.com, @maddogsdoc. That's where you can find out information about screenings. There's we don't have any New York screenings coming up, but we'll be at Bedford. If anyone wants to make the train ride, I think it's June the 2nd, but I could be mistaken. Yeah. But that's on maddogsdoc.com. All theater listings.
All right, we'll put some of those descriptions up in the description of this episode.
Thank you.
So people can direct them to the appropriate places. So listeners, you'll have your instructions.
Cool.
All right. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here.
Thank you.
Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really does help. Many thanks to Church of Good Shepherd here in Inwood for hosting us, and to HighTights.com for uptown promotional support. You can support Inwood Artworks and our on-air programming by making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to keep up with all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmmakers Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Artworks On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.